What if I told you that one of the most important and revolutionary guitars in modern music was a complete and total failure? This is the Ibanez Universe, and its story is a drama in 2 acts. A guitar so far ahead of its time, it had to be created by a virtuoso, crash and burn, be forgotten, and then be resurrected by a band from Bakersfield that would use it to create an entirely new genre of music. This isn't just the story of a 7-string guitar, it's the story of how a failed idea changed everything. To understand how revolutionary the Ibanez Universe was, you need to know what the 7-string guitar was before 1990, and it was not a rock instrument. For centuries, 7-string guitars were acoustic instruments found in Russian folk music and Brazilian samba. In America, its only real champion was the jazz guitarist George Van Eps, who used a custom Epiphone archtop in the 1930s to play walking bass lines under his chords. But a solid body, mass-produced 7-string for rock music? It didn't exist. A few prototypes had been made for other players, but they never went anywhere. The market for it was literally zero. Enter Steve Vai. In the late 1980s, Vai is on top of the world. He's done stints with Frank Zappa and David Lee Roth, and he's about to join Whitesnake. But he's also secretly working on his own masterpiece, the album that would become Passion and Warfare. Vai was hearing music in his head that he couldn't play on a standard 6-string guitar. He needed more range. He needed to go lower. So he went to Ibanez, a company he'd already developed his legendary Gem model with. According to Vai, the core idea for Universe took about 30 seconds. After a few experiments, including a high A string that kept breaking, they settled on adding a low B string. His relationship with Ibanez was key. He'd been with them for years, and he trusted them. They were the only company that would build his quirky and bizarre ideas, like the Munky grip on his gems. In 1990, Ibanez launched the Universe, and Vai's album Passion and Warfare became his ultimate showcase. But listen to how he used it. Melodic, orchestral, expressive. He used that low string for complex phrases and dramatic sweeping runs. This was a tool for a virtuoso to expand his compositional palette. Ibanez released 3 models. They were beautifully made, high-performance, Japanese-built guitars, and nobody bought them. Seriously, the guitar world looked at this thing and basically said, cool, but what do I do with it? In the early 90s, grunge was exploding, virtuosity was kind of out, and raw simplicity was definitely in. The Universe was seen as a novelty instrument. It was too connected to Steve Vai. The average guitarist thought, well, I can't play like Steve Vai, so I don't need his guitar. Sales were so bad that by 1994, Ibanez had discontinued most of the line, and in 1995, for the first time since its launch, Ibanez produced 0 Universe guitars. The first mass-produced solid-body 7-string was officially a commercial failure. Now you might be thinking, this was some super limited run like, the 50s Gibson Explorer. It wasn't. The serial numbers show that Ibanez made thousands of them. They weren't rare, they just weren't selling. The project was dead. But at the exact same time the Universe was dying in stores, 2 young guitarists from Bakersfield, California were discovering it in pawn shops. James Munky Shaffer was a massive Steve Vai fan. He'd heard Passion and Warfare, and unlike everyone else, he wasn't focusing on those solos. He was obsessed with the rhythmic, chugging potential of those low notes. He saved up and bought a used Universe. He and his high school friend Brian, Ted Welch, then did something nobody else was doing. They tuned the 7-string even lower, all the way down to A standard. That's like a whole step. For Korn, this wasn't a tool for melodic expansion. This was, in their words, their magic power. They used that low string as a weapon of pure rhythmic aggression. And here's the dramatic irony. Their debut album Korn was released in 1994. The very same year, Ibanez was pretty much killing off the 7-string. As the album built a massive following, kids started showing up at guitar stores asking for a 7-string guitar. And Ibanez, who had just discontinued them, was suddenly flooded with calls. The best part of this story comes from Steve Vai himself. He recalls driving in his car one day when a song came on the radio. It was so heavy, so powerful, and so unique that he literally pulled his car over just to listen. He said,
Not long after that, I'm driving down the street and I hear this incredible heavy music on the radio, and I knew it was a 7-string.
And that somebody was doing something with it that was completely different from what he was doing. Of course, that band was Korn. Vai had even told Ibanez to keep the guitar in production even if you only sell a few a year, because he knew someone would eventually get it, and he was right. Thanks to Korn, Ibanez reintroduced the Universe in 1996. This time, it wasn't a novelty. It was the essential instrument for an entire generation and a new genre, nu metal. Korn's impact was undeniable. They took Vai's invention and gave it a new language. They would eventually get their own signature Ibanez that K7, but it all started out with those used Universe models. In the end, Steve Vai calls it a co-creative effort. He was the visionary who had to invent the tool, but Korn were the revolutionaries who showed the world what to do with it. The Ibanez Universe had to fail before it could succeed, and in doing so, it created two legacies, not just one, and became one of the most important guitars ever made. Sometimes your idea isn't a failure, it's just waiting for its Korn. Steve Vai's co-creative effort with Korn had just given the 7-string its rebirth. Ibanez, seeing the calls flooding in, did an immediate 180 and rushed the Universe back into production in 1996. But this time, it wasn't being sold to virtuosos. It was being sold to kids who wanted that Korn sound, that low-tuned A standard bone-crushing aggression. Korn had unlocked the formula. That extra string wasn't for solos, it was for weight. And suddenly, other bands who were already pushing the limits of heavy music had their aha moment. Enter Fear Factory. Guitarist Dino Cazares was already a pioneer. For their 1995 masterpiece The Manufacture, he was tuning his 6-string guitars all the way down to B standard. It was a nightmare. The strings were floppy, the sound was muddy, and it was impossible to keep that guitar in tune. So when Ibanez approached him in 95, he instantly got it. The Universe was the solution to his problem. A guitar literally built to be tuned to be standard right out of the box, but Dino added his own crucial innovation. He noticed the standard DiMarzio Blaze pickups sounded like Korn. He didn't want to sound like Korn, he wanted to sound like Fear Factory. So he contacted EMG and had them create the first ever active 7-string pickup. The result was that tight, percussive, machine gun-like riffing that defined industrial metal. Korn had made the 7-string heavy. Dino Cazares made it clean and precise. And then there was the band that toured with Korn.
We've all felt like and been treated like
Limp Bizkit. Wes Borland has said he recorded their entire first album, $3 Bill Y'all, on a 6-string, but after touring with Korn, Ibanez literally gave him a handful of Universe 7-strings. He immediately adopted them and used them for that entire era, from 1997 to 1999. But like all those pioneers, he didn't just copy Korn. He created his own bizarre tunings, like C-sharp standard with a duplicated high string, so that he could get those weird, sitar-like drone sounds. And that was the tipping point. The floodgates were now officially open. The 7-string was no longer an instrument, it was the instrument. It became the visual and sonic uniform for the entire nu metal genre. Stephen Carpenter of Deftones, who had been on 6 strings for their first 2 albums, made the permanent switch to 7 strings around the White Pony and self-titled era, and he's never looked back. In fact, he's now moved on to 8 and 9 strings. The sound of rock and metal had fundamentally changed. It was lower, heavier, and more rhythmic than ever before. The impact of this movement is hard to overstate. Ibanez, Steve Vai, and Korn were the 3 pioneers who together created an entire market. By 2001, the demand was so high that Ibanez collaborated with Munky and Head to create their own signature model, the K7. This wasn't just a reskinned Universe, it was built from the ground up for their sound, with a mahogany body for a darker tone and the iconic U-bar tremolo. This spawned a new generation of players who didn't just want to play low, they wanted to push the very boundaries of rhythm. Today, 7, 8, and even 9-string guitars are completely normal. You'll probably find them in almost every guitar store. Modern metalcore, deathcore, and progressive metal are all built on the foundation that these pioneers laid down initially. But it all goes back to one guitar, the Ibanez Universe. It had to be invented by a virtuoso with a vision for melody, it had to be misunderstood and fail, and it had to be found by a new generation with a vision for rhythm. It's the ultimate proof that sometimes an idea isn't a failure, it's just waiting for its moment to change the world. Thanks for watching.